Hallelujah. Praise the Lord Jesus. Amen. So this is about the healing of the wound. Now, remember, we talked about the heads, and how many heads does the beast of Revelation 13 have? It has 7 heads. And we saw that the beast of Revelation 13 is a manifestation of Satan on earth. Because we also read in the book of Revelation 12 that the dragon has 7 heads and 10 horns. So we see that before the dragon is manifested, he existed in a spiritual form. Before we have a manifestation of anything on earth, there is always that thing in the spirit. It is like Jesus. Jesus always was God. He existed before there was time even. But that same Jesus was manifested at a particular time in history, and that is 2,000 years ago. The God who made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that in them is, which is Jesus, he was manifest. That is the unseen God, the God who is a spirit that nobody had ever seen. That same God came on earth veiled in flesh. And that is how it works in the realm of the spirit. So the devil, who is the dragon in Revelation 12, before he manifests as the beast, because the beast is the expression, is the manifestation of the dragon. And the dragon has 7 heads and 10 horns. And when he is manifest on the earth as a political power, because what is a beast in the Bible? What is a beast? A beast is a political system. It's a kingdom. So the manifestation of the kingdom of Satan. Remember what Daniel says in Daniel chapter 7, that he saw this beast coming out of the sea. And we saw that. The first was a lion. The second was a bear. The third was a leopard. And then he saw a dreadful and terrible beast that was nondescript. But he said they came out of the sea. What is that? It is a manifestation of satanic kingdoms as Satan was manifesting his kingdom on earth. Now remember, these are kingdoms that are made up of men. They're political systems. Just like we have the political systems today, we live in the United Kingdom. There is a government. That is what it is. A beast is a government made up of men. And that's why King Nebuchadnezzar is reckoned to be the lion. That's why the Greek Empire, the man who led the Greeks to war against the Medes and the Persians, is called the leopard. That's the leopard beast, meaning a political power. And the bear is a kingdom, that is the Medes and the Persians. And of course, we have the terrible beast, that is Rome. So these are political powers. We saw that. Now, Satan gave his seat and his power and his great authority to the beast. In other words, the beast rules. Satan's seat is that beast power. That means that Satan established a political system that he uses to control the entire world. Because the whole entire world is going to be controlled by this beast power. Now remember, that's why Revelation 13 tells us that you will not be able to buy or sell. What is that? Who establishes this kind of a law? Is it just an individual? No, it is a government. Only the government can actually tell you that you cannot buy or sell. Only the government does this. So the reason why people will not be able to buy and sell is because of a government decree. So when the Bible is talking about a beast and the image of the beast, and that these beasts, because they're both political powers, that means that they will gain control over all men upon the earth. And today, this kind of thing is all over the media. People are talking about it. They can see what the Bible is saying is true. They actually are seeing this. That's why the CBDCs are being set up. That is the new money, which means that you will not handle cash anymore. It's going to be digital money. That's why they want us all on the internet, so that we can go on to the grid, that we can be controlled, that we can be monitored. Everything is going to be digital. So when you get to that, then the government will have the power to isolate those that refuse to go along with the government's orders. They will make sure that these people will not have any service. So is the Bible true? Absolutely. The Bible is true. So, how was the wound healed? Now, we saw last time, we saw that the beast that we call the Vatican, because that's what the beast of Revelation 13 is. We saw how the papacy ruled. Remember this is where we were last. The year 538, the Pope gained political power through the Justinian decree. In 1798, when Baltier entered Italy, invaded the Vatican, and declared Rome a republic, this declaration and the death of the Pope ended the Vatican's political power. So from 1798, we subtracted 538 AD when he came into power, and we found that according to prophecy, that was 1,260 years. So Revelation 13:5 was fulfilled, that says, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And we saw that 42 months is exactly 1,260 days. And when we talk about prophetic days, we are talking about 1,260 years. So the Bible was fulfilled, but the Roman power, the papacy, which ascended into power during the reign of Vigilus in 538 AD, that political power that was gained through the Justinian decree, the Eastern Roman Empire, which helped the Western Roman Empire become the very, very center of Roman power. This power, the Roman power, papacy, with the Pope as Caesar, as we saw, reigned from 538 to 1790. And that prophecy was fulfilled. So we know that he was wounded to death. So we come to that scripture, the healing of the wound. So Revelation 13 verse 3 says, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Now I wanted to say something about and all the world wondered after the beast. Now the word wondered is to admire and follow. That's what the word wondered is. The whole world admired. When the beast wound was healed, they admired, they marveled. It was something that was incredible, that this beast would come back to power after it lost its power. That means the papal authority that was destroyed by Battier and Napoleon, this very power was healed. And after it was healed, the whole world wondered and followed them and believed them, admired them. And thus, Revelation 13:4 says, and the world worshipped the dragon and the beast. And they said, who is able to make war with the beast? Because the beast of the chain, this power came back to life again. It was wounded to death. It came back. This is what they said, who is able to make war with him? That means that even the Napoleon and armies of this world could not overcome this power. They could not hold it down. The wound was healed and it looked like a miracle. So they admired it. And I'm going to talk to you about this in a deeper sense. So the book tells us, Revelation 13:4, and they worshipped the dragon. They worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? So this is a war. So the people are saying this. Who is able to make war with him? Who can stop him? Who is like unto the beast? Now, do you see why they admired the beast? Do you see why they followed the beast? Because seemingly the beast was able to come back to life again. Just like Christ died and rose again from the dead, this beast comes back and the people are shocked. They admire it because they thought it would never come back to life. So the power of this beast is a great power. And the people were shocked. They admired and they followed. And we're going to see how. Now, there is a quote I want to give you here by a man who was the general of the Jesuits. His name is Tamburini. Listen to what he says. Quote, see, sir, from this chamber, I govern not only to Paris, but to China, not only to China, but to all the world, without anyone knowing how I do it. Now, do you know that these Jesuits are actually the military arm of the Catholic Church? Did you know that Pope Francis is a Jesuit? Jesuitism is an order in the Roman Catholic Church. It is actually like a secret society, just like the Masons. The Jesuits are the military arm of the Roman Catholic Church. These are the planners. These are the people that make, you know, when the Pope speaks, they're the people who actually say to the Pope what he needs to say. The Jesuits are the inheritors of the Templars. Now, if you know anything about the Templars, back in the 1100s, these men were called the protectors of the church. They went to Jerusalem to take it from the Muslims, and they protected the Holy Land. This is the story that we're given. But these men, they were the army of the Pope. These men were Christians, but actually they were not Christians. In the minds of men, they were Christians, but they were not. They were actually idol worshippers, because the Catholic Church does not produce Christians. It produces idol worshippers, worshippers of Satan. So these men are the people that today we call the Jesuits, the Templars. So do they govern the whole world? This is the general of the Jesuits speaking. See, sir, from this chamber, I govern not only to Paris, but to China, not only to China, but unto all the world, without anyone knowing how I do it. Do the Jesuits rule the world? Does the Catholic Church rule the world? You bet they do. They actually rule every government in the whole entire world. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. They rule the entire world. Their history is very clear. But their power came to an end in 1798. That it was a wound, it was the loss of their political power, and now they're going to gain it again. So let us go a little back in history to see what was going on as the wound was being healed. In 1848, nationalist liberal revolutions began to break out across Europe. And in 1849, a Roman Republic was declared and the Pope fled the city. Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, recently elected president of the newly declared French Second Republic. Now remember, there was a First Republic that was declared in 1798. Now, that is when Berthier came in the first time. Now, Napoleon declared the second time the French Republic. Because you see, Napoleon was the conqueror of Italy. And he was ruling, and his power was rivaling that of the Pope. So he declared that there is a second republic, and the Pope fled the city. He knew what was going to happen. Now, let us ask this question. What were the threats to Italian unification? That means that this new republic that was declared, the Italian Republic, without the Pope at the head. Remember, these people had been ruled by the Pope. The Pope was sitting in Rome in Italy, ruling the whole of Europe. Now the Pope has lost his power, and a new republic has been declared. Now, what was the threat? Now, we need to look at the threat of the Italian unification without the Pope. This is where we're going to see what was really going on. There was a good reason to believe that Italy wouldn't last. Many other European countries considered the likelihood that the country would disintegrate. At the same time, the popes were working overtime to undo Italian unification. That is something that is unknown today. The new Italian government had a greater fear that the popes would flee Rome. They realized that this would be the greatest blow to the ability to continue, and that other countries would attack them to restore the Pope to power. Now, you've got to realize what is really going on here. When the popes lost their authority, that means they were no longer political powers. They wanted it back. So they were fighting against this unification. And the way they did it is that because they had many Catholic faithful people across Europe, in Germany there were Catholics, in France there were Catholics, in the United Kingdom there were Catholics. So what the Pope did was to make sure that because of the huge following that he had across the world, because remember at this time, the Catholics were all over the place in America. The Catholics were all over South America. The Catholics were in India. The Catholics were in China. The Catholics were everywhere, right? So the Pope had a great faithful following of men and women who believed that he was the vicar of Christ. And so the Pope, or the popes, when they saw this unification of Italy, they began to fight back. This is a very interesting story. Very interesting story. Now, remember, he lost his power, but now he wants it back. He begins to fight. Now, I'm telling you how the wound was healed. This is how the wound is healing now. There's a fight. Remember, they said, who is able to make war with the beast? Who is able to stand before him? Who can defeat him? So the Pope is fighting to get his power back. And he knew that if they go to another country, another country would automatically receive the Pope. But the reason why the Pope didn't want to leave Rome it's a very interesting story. And that's why he stayed put. You see that building there? Do you see that picture? Do you see that building? That is the Basilica of St. Peter. Now, in the front of this basilica, you see the what we call the obelisk. The obelisk. Do you know that that obelisk is actually Egyptian? It's Egyptian. They brought it all the way from Egypt. And that is that which it was actually the obelisk that belonged to Thutmose III. That is one of the pharaohs of Egypt. It is very, very old. It is almost 3,000 years old, this particular stone, this particular obelisk. And the obelisk stands for sun worship. It is a standing image to the sun. It is actually, it's a male organ, you know, the phallus. It actually represents that. That's what it is. An obelisk is a phallus. These people worship body parts. They don't worship Jesus Christ. They worship the sun. This is an image of the sun. So the Pope cannot leave Rome. He cannot walk away from Rome, because this is where his foundation is. And the foundation of the Catholic Church is based on this worship of Satan, the worship of the sun. And, you know, the way they constructed this, do you think the Pope was going to leave his capital and go to another country? No way. No way. Even if another country was going to accept the Pope, he was not going to live. This is his capital. This is where they spend all those monies to build this structure, and they were not going to leave it. They're going to stay. So what Pope had to do, the popes, for the period of about 60 years, what they had to do was to fight back against the Italian unification under this the new republic, and to destroy that republic, and then the Pope will come back to power. Let's see how he does it. Now, if some other country had been disposed to take the Pope in, he would have left. That's not absolutely true. He wouldn't have left. Pius IX, Leo XIII, and the popes for the next 6 decades, 60 years, portrayed themselves as prisoners of the Vatican. Why did the Pope say he was a prisoner? Because that's what he said. He said, I'm a prisoner, because he was not going to leave. And he did this so that he can get sympathy from his followers, saying that I'm a prisoner in the Vatican. This is how the Pope did it. I'm a prisoner. So for 59 years, the popes would not recognize the legitimacy of the Italian state. Part of it was the posture that they would not set foot on Italian soil because it was the soil of the usurper. So they said that their power had been stolen. That's what the popes were saying at the time. Now remember, this is what they were telling the faithful. We've been robbed. We are the rightful rulers. We are prisoners in the Vatican. Now, do you see how he turns the society around? Do you see how now he gets into the psyche of a man to show them? And remember, all those Catholics that were sympathetic to the Pope began to support his cause. They began to do campaigns against their own governments. The Pope had a secret army that was working for him to bring him back to power. Wow. This is amazing. Now, at this time, there's something called the First Vatican Council, right? And we're going to read about this because this is very important. The council was convoked by Pope Pius IX on the 29th of June, 1868, under the rising threat of the Kingdom of Italy encroaching on the Papal States. It opened on 8th December 1869 and was adjourned on the 20th of October 1870 after the Italian capture of Rome. Its best known decision is its definition of papal infallibility. Now, I'm going to explain what that means, because that's very important in this particular recovery of, or the healing of the wound, the papal infallibility. In the 3 sessions, there was discussion and approval of only 2 constitutions. Die Filias, the dogmatic constitution on the Catholic faith, and Pastor Atanus, the first dogmatic constitution on the Church of Christ, dealing with the primacy and infallibility of the Bishop of Rome, when solemnly defining dogma. Now, there are 2 words here, and I know this is quite new to you, but the primacy means the word prime, which is primacy. It means this is his authority as a political ruler. So in this Vatican Council, they were defining the primacy and the infallibility of the Bishop of Rome. Now, the popes, primacy and infallibility. Now, 2 words that you must understand. Now, primacy, meaning he's the head political ruler of the world, and infallibility, which word means that the Pope, when speaking from his chair, he speaks like God, he doesn't make any mistakes. That's the word infallibility. It means that he is without mistake, without a fault. That is the word infallible. It means that the Pope cannot make a mistake when he speaks. Therefore, he is as God. Okay? You need to understand those 2 terms, primacy and infallibility. And we're going to come to that in a later lecture. Now, until 1860, Pope Pius IX ruled over his papal states, which stretched across the Italian peninsula, dividing it into two. The following year, when urged to accept a peaceful settlement to avoid an armed assault, he indignantly refused. Even after the Pope's subjects voted overwhelmingly to join Italy, he remained adamant. This corner of earth is mine. I received it from Christ. Now, this is from concordatwatch.eu about the Lateran Treaty and the Catholic Church into a state. Now, it is a historical fact that this is what the Pope said. You know, the Italian government said, well, look, we can actually rule together. The Pope said, no, I'm not going to accept to rule with you. I'm bigger than you. I'm greater than you. Remember what Daniel said, that he was more stout than others. And the Pope claimed that this little corner where the Vatican is, he calls it his corner, the corner of the earth. He said, it is mine. And he claimed that he received it from Christ. You see, the Pope has to use the name of Jesus. He must appear as the servant of God. To the eyes of men, he must appear like the servant of God, but he's not. We know that he's the Antichrist. What does the word Antichrist mean? In the place of Jesus Christ. He is in the place, and that is what vicarious filii Dei means, in the place of Jesus Christ. He's the vicegerent or the vice regent of Jesus. So he says. So to claim that he was given this by Christ, it was to fool the people because they didn't know any better and they believed it. So in 1870, Victor Emmanuel II, king of the newly united Italy, sought an agreement with Pius IX in which the Pope would rule the Tiber's right bank, while the king would govern the left bank, sharing power. The Pope said no. When the Pope rejected this argument, Italian troops seized power in Rome, and Pius IX sought refuge in the Vatican palaces, declaring himself a prisoner. That's another source from David Katzer. Now, this man, we're going to read about him in a moment, who was David Katzer, because he came up with some very important information. Now, listen. The Pope rejected sharing power. What is he doing? Fighting back to get his power back. I'm not going to share authority with anybody. I'm going to rule Europe. That's what the Pope is saying. So the Italian troops seized power in Rome. And Pope Pius went back into the Vatican palaces. He declared himself again a prisoner. So after the unification of Italy for 58 years, a succession of popes refused to acknowledge the new country that had swallowed up the papal kingdom. They refused to even set foot on its soil. With castles, Pius IX depicted his own boycott as a tale of persecution and talked of being a prisoner in the Vatican. Again, another source, the concordatwatch.eu. Now, this, I'm taking different sources so that you can see that they're all saying the same thing. The Pope was trying to gain sympathy of his followers. So he boycotted, in his own boycott, he began to spin a tale of persecution. Oh, I am being persecuted. I am being persecuted. My people, oh, Roman Catholics, you must rally. I am being persecuted. I am a prisoner in the Vatican. This is how he began to make war. This is how he began to gain his power back, because the people now became very sympathetic with him. A united secular Italy, the dream of Garibaldi and his red-shirted legions, could mean only that papal power would wane. And Pius counted as a great blasphemy the modern notion that church and state should be separate, or that the papacy could survive and even flourish without owning its own land. So he called that blasphemy. The Pope said it is blasphemy that the Pope cannot rule his own land, that church and state should be separate. Do you see the issue? It is about the supremacy of the Pope. The Pope wanted to be the top man again, the supremacy of the Pope. Now, remember, we talked about the infallibility and the supremacy or the primacy of the Pope. The same word, supremacy or primacy, meaning the head. He has to be the head again. So he called this blasphemy. Now, you can imagine, it's a war. He's fighting against this unification of Italy. Now, let's see how this develops. Now, I want to come back to papal infallibility. Now, we are still talking about this, the convocation, when they came together to have this convocation. What do they call it? The First Vatican Council. Now, papal infallibility. 7 months later, in 18th July 1870, the prelates, that is the Roman Catholic teachers and bishops and cardinals and all the rest of them, the prelates assembled in St. Peter's accepted an uncompromising dogma that the Pope, when speaking from his throne on a matter of faith or morals, is inspired by God and therefore infallible. Do you see what that means? That when the Pope speaking from his throne, so he has to have a throne. In order for the Pope to sit as God, he has to have a throne. And when he's sitting on that throne and speaks on matters of faith or morals, as long as he's seated on that throne, is inspired by God and therefore infallible. He cannot make a mistake. Now, you see what the Pope is doing here. Now, when does this happen? This happened when the Pope lost his political power. He brings his prelates together. They come in this Vatican, the Vatican Council, the first Vatican Council, and now they say the Pope, when he speaks from his throne. Now, at this time, the Pope doesn't have a throne. But they said that when he speaks from the throne, then he speaks as a moral authority, and that he is inspired by God, and therefore he cannot make a mistake. So he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. You don't make a mistake. You know the word infallible? When you say that a human cannot make a mistake, and they say that he's inspired by God. Well, is the Pope inspired by God? Absolutely not. So this is a ruse. This is a lie. It's not true. But you see, Satan is the one that is behind this, you see. So in 1871, Italy was finally unified by observing the papal states. The Pope, now deposed as King of Rome, he doesn't have a throne, but he says that when I sit on my throne and speak, so he knew he was going to get it back. The wound was going to be healed, according to prophecy. The Pope, now deposed as King of Rome, retreated behind the walls of the Vatican, where he continued to fight the Italian state with every means at his disposal. So the Pope had a lot of people on his side. And there is something called the excommunication, and we're going to see what that is. How the Pope waged war against the Italian unification. He excommunicated the King of Italy. He had long railed against secular values of the Italian kingdom. In his 1864 syllabus of errors, he had already condemned more than 80 errors and preserved and perverse doctrines. Okay, so the Pope came up with a teaching, a syllabus of errors. That means a teaching. That is, he was teaching the faith. You see, beloved, now let me explain this. You see, even when the Pope lost his political power, he did not lose his influence among the Catholics. Because like I said, he had many, many Catholic people following him. In Rome, in Italy, he had many Catholics there. In France, many Catholics. In Germany, many Catholics. In England, many Catholics. So the Pope had to still continue writing and saying things that would show the people that he's still in power. And so he would excommunicate. Now, the word excommunicate means that when the Pope gave you, excommunicated you, it meant that you're not allowed to have Holy Communion in the Catholic Church. You cannot be baptized in the Catholic Church. You cannot be married in the Catholic Church. And you will not receive a burial in the Catholic Church. You are banned. And excommunication in those days meant to the people who didn't know the Bible, because remember, this was the Dark Ages. People were not really aware of what the Bible was teaching, because at this time the Reformation had just come up, and the Bible was already being in the press. So not many people understood the doctrines of God. So if you didn't go to the Catholic Church, you would never go to heaven. They believe that the salvation was given to you through the church. So you have to be a member of the Catholic Church in order for you to really go to heaven. That's what the people believe. So when a Pope excommunicated you, you are denied all these things. Therefore, the people had great fear that if the Pope excommunicated you, you will never go to heaven. That's what that power meant. And that's why they kept the Bible away from the people. That's why it was called the Dark Ages, because the Bible was no longer something that you could have. It was, if you're found out with the Bible, you are murdered. They killed you. So that's how the Pope exercised power, and he did that through fear, because the people did not know the Bible. So when the King of Italy was excommunicated, the people knew that they could not serve this king anymore. And in his 1864 syllabus of errors, he had already condemned more than 80 errors and perverse doctrines, including separation of church and state, a free press, and secular education. Now, most Italians understood such errors to be presented as a non too oblique condemnation of the Italian kingdom. So the people knew that when the Pope wrote this syllabus of errors, the people understood that he was condemning the Italian king. He was calling it illegitimate government. He was saying that Italy, the power, the political rulers were usurpers. And look at what he was condemning. He condemned the separation of church and state. He condemned free press. Nobody should say anything that the Pope, the Pope has control over the press today. Well, people don't realize this. The Pope has power over the press today. The press says what the Pope wants to be said. And secular education. Does the Pope control the education of the world? You bet he does. Yes. So this is how the war began. He condemned these things. So most Italians understood this. So Pope Pius IX also directly forbade. Now listen to this. Pope Pius IX also directly forbade Catholics to participate by way of voting or any political involvement in the workings of the godless Italian state. So he turned the people against the state. Do you see now? Do you understand what he's doing? He turned the people against the state. Don't vote for these people. Don't participate. So all the Catholics were told, do not support this illegitimate government of Italy. And the people obeyed the Pope. And what happens to leaders who are excommunicated and the people, your own subjects that are supposed to listen to you, they're not listening to you, they're listening to the Pope. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to lose. You're going to lose. Because the people have more fear of God than they have of man. You see? So using the Vatican's meticulous records, Pastor shows the extent to which inquiries were made to foreign governments about both refuge for the Pope and aid in his quest to be returned to power in Rome. So the Pope was working, the machinery was working. Other countries were looking at possibilities of how to help the Pope get back his power because they're very sympathetic. These people are Catholics. Ironically, it was Mussolini who ended the tension in February 1929, and in July of that year, the Pope was freed from the Vatican walls. So who ended this stalemate and who brought the Pope back to power? It was this machination, this meticulous working with foreign governments who were sympathetic to the Pope. And they began to actually make headways. And they knew that there could be war. Now, the Italian government began to fear that if the Pope gets support from the rest of the nations in Europe, because he was gaining a lot of support, there was going to be war, and Italy was going to be a place of great bloodshed. So Mussolini is the one who ended the tension in 1929. Now let's read about this man called Tatzer. Was born in New York City and earned his PhD in anthropology from Brandeis University, a professor of social sciences, anthropology and Italian studies at Brown University. He's the author of The Popes Against the Jews, The Kidnapping of Edgardo Mortara, and 4 earlier books. Tatzer is researching a book in Bologna, Italy, on Mussolini and the Vatican. The man was given access to the records that existed in Rome, the archives of the Vatican, to find this record. So his record is pretty impressive. So in 1929, the long wait finally paid off. So the popes were refusing. We are not going to be governed by Italy. We will not govern together as a coalition with Italy. We must come back. So what happened? In 1929, the long wait finally paid off when Mussolini proved willing to enter an alliance with the Vatican. A pact with Mussolini granting it sovereign nation status and requiring that Catholicism be Italy's sole and official religion, writes Katz. So that's exactly what happened in history. Mussolini enters an alliance. He agrees to give the Pope back his political power, the Vatican, and he agrees in the Lateran Treaty that the Catholicism should be Italy's sole official religion, right? That's actually what happened in history. Now, there was a paper that reported this incident. This is the San Francisco Chronicles in February 11th, 1929. Mussolini and Gaspari signed historic pact. Now, this excerpt says the Roman question tonight was a thing of the past, and the Vatican was at peace with Italy in affixing the autographs to the memorable document, healing the wound. Can you believe that the paper reported actually wrote that? This is not, can you believe that they wrote healing the wound? Actually, that's how they referred to this particular historic pact. Now, the newspapers, that was in 11th February 1929, the newspaper wrote that this signing of these documents was healing the wound. Extreme cordiality was displayed on both sides. San Francisco Chronicles, a United States paper, wrote healing the wound. Lateran Treaty, what was it about? The Lateran Pact, which is what Mussolini and the Vatican signed. The Lateran Pact signed by Mussolini on 11 February 1929 had three parts: a political treaty, that means giving the Vatican its own microstate. Number two, a financial convention, giving the Vatican reparations. And number three, a concordat, giving privileges within Italy, for instance, by letting the church influence public education. In return for all this, Mussolini received Vatican recognition of the Kingdom of Italy, of which he happened to be the dictator. So who recognizes Italy now as a king? It's the Pope. So that means that as long as the Pope did not recognize Italy as a kingdom, Italy was non-existent. Do you see how powerful this man is? Do you see how much influence he carries? So the three things that were in this pact was to give the Vatican its own state again, meaning he became a king of a country once again. The papacy now becomes a political power. He lost it in 1798, and in 1929, he gets it back. There you go. The wound is healed. He's back into power. He's back into his political office. And he gets money, he gets compensated. And not only that, he becomes the one who influences public education. Do you know why this was so important for the Vatican? Why the popes wanted to influence public education? Because when you give your children to the school, to the government, whose policies, whose education are they receiving? Do you think they're receiving the education of God? No, they're receiving Roman Catholic education. That's why the Roman Catholic Church wanted to influence public education so that people will never be able to know God, and they will be given the dish that belongs to Satan. That's why Daniel and his three friends, when they entered into Babylon, they were given the king's delicacies, and they said, no, we will not eat the king's food, because they knew that that was poison. It was going to destroy their intellect, their spirituality, and it was going to destroy their bodies. Education that comes from the Roman Catholic Church, which is what they do, they influence education, is to destroy the morals and the spiritual truths that we hold dear. So Mussolini was recognized as a kingdom by the Pope. So who is higher? Is it the Mussolini or is it the papacy? Of course the papacy, because he recognizes Italy now. Italy had no legitimacy until the Pope said they had legitimacy. So in 1929, agreements called the Lateran Treaties, again, this is another source, History Learning, we read that from the concordat.eu, and another one, historylearning.com, says, in 1929, agreements called the Lateran Treaties were signed, which set out who would control education in Italy, as well as a host of other agreements. When the Roman Catholic Church had lost much of its land, when Italy was unified in 1870, it was compensated, look at this, it was compensated to the tune of 30 million in 1929 and given land in Rome in which to construct the Vatican, the new papal state. On top of this, the Pope was given a small army, rail station, and a police force. So how much money did he get? 30 million. The financial convention, 30 million. That's how much he got, 30 million. A lot of money in those days, 30 million to construct the Vatican. Now the Pope is in power again. The Pope is in power again. He has a police force. He's been given a small army. Have you ever seen in the Pope in the Vatican, we have what we call the Swiss guards, the men that stand with their their spears, and they are the bodyguards. So the Pope has a small army in the Vatican because he's a kingdom by himself. This is when this happened. In 1929, the Pope got his political power, which he lost in 1798 under Bartier. Now he gets it back under Mussolini. And Mussolini was a Catholic. So that's why. The Lateran Treaties also specified that the Roman Catholic faith was to be the state religion in a section called the Concordat. The Concordat. This set out rules around religion in Italy, in that children in both primary and secondary schools had to have religious education at school, not the Christian Protestant teaching, but the religious education according to Rome. The church was also given control over marriage and appointing of bishops. Through the latter still had to be agreed, though the latter still had to be agreed by the government before the appointment would be finalized. Well, that is a detail that we're not going to go into, but you know, I know what they mean by that. But listen, this is the most important thing. Education is under the Roman Church. And marriage, they have to control marriage. You know? That's why you need a certificate when you get married today, because they control that. And the appointment of bishops. In the Old Testament, you never need a certificate to get married. There's no way in the Bible says you need a certificate to get married. But you could issue a bill of divorce. But you would never need a certificate for marriage. This was a matter of the heart, you see. So this is another reporter, the New York Times. Listen to how they reported this. The same event in 1929, February 12, this is when this was written. The New York Times said, Vatican and Italy signed pact recreating a papal state. 60 years of enmity ended. Throngs cheer in streets, acclaim Gaspari and Mussolini, signers of 3 agreements, hires, health, gratification. He says he asks as little as possible, dealing with the sun, and ignores criticism. Rejoicing is widespread. Chamberlain voices England's congratulations, and other nations mark the event. Did they wander after the beast? Does that not sound like the whole world is wandering after the beast? The papers are talking about it. Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of England at that time, and all the nations mark the event. Does that not sound like wandering after the beast? They were rejoicing. There was cheering. The enmity is ended. People are happy. The Pope is back in power. There were cheers. There were shouts of acclamation. There was rejoicing in the streets. They wandered after the beast. That was February 11, 1929. The Pope is again an independent sovereign ruler, as he was throughout the Middle Ages, though his temporal realm established today is the most microscopic independent state in the world and probably the smallest in all history. That is what the New York Times report. The Vatican is only 42 hectares. That's all it is. It's a very small piece of land, microscopic, they say. And this is the souvenir of the creation of the Vatican State by the Lateran Pact, its Trinity, of King Victor Emmanuel III, Pope Pius XI, and Benito Mussolini celebrate the new unity of temporal and spiritual authority. This accommodation between church and state was called the Peace Latatia, Pax Latatia, after the Roman goddess of joy. So this pact was not named after Jesus Christ. This agreement was of the devil. It is in the name of the goddess, the Roman goddess of joy. If this was of God, it would be named after Christ, but it wasn't. The peace was named after the goddess, an idol. So, beloved, now you see, do you see how they regained their power? Do you see how the wound got healed? That was the wound was inflicted when he lost his political power. And it looked as if the Pope is dead, that the Vatican will never come back again, that it will never again be a political power. But after what we have read and seen, after 60 years, the same power that had lost its political authority regains it again. Now, the Pope today is a political ruler. He is a king. The Bible said his wound was going to be healed. And that's what it means. And the papers reported it. The San Francisco Chronicle said, healing the wound. It's like reading the Bible, healing the wound. Now you know how the wound was healed. It was just the Pope coming back to power again. That's what the Bible is telling us. And the whole world wandered after the beast. They cheered. Hooray! Go, Pope! They loved it. The whole world. If you know prophecy, you wouldn't rejoice. You wouldn't be happy. You wouldn't be clapping your hands. No, but the whole world wondered, admired this, because they're Catholics. They're Catholics. They thought that the Pope was being persecuted. And that is how the Pope became again a political leader. Any questions? Well, No questions? So we're going to end it there. God bless you. I want to stop the recording.
I want to ask